On today's episode of Insects for Fun, we feature one of the most infamous insects on the planet, the yellow crazy ant. With a name that sounds like it belongs in a sci-fi movie, this tiny creature has proven to be a global menace. But how did this ant get its reputation? We'll explore its origins, habitats, life cycle, and most importantly, its devastating impact on ecosystems. These ants, like all ants, belong to the family Formicidae, which is a crazy thought on its own, considering how many different genera and species of ants are out there. Currently, there are around 300 known genera of ants and 12,000 species documented. But the number is believed to be much higher than that. The yellow crazy ant is scientifically known as Anaplolepses gracilipes, which means pugnacious and slender. The ants are indeed quite pugnacious, which just means they're eager to fight, or in the case of yellow crazy ants, destroy island ecosystems. Because these ants make the list for top worst invasive ants, and made the top 100 worst invasive animals list as well. The ants are yellow and quite slender, as their name suggests, only being about 3 to 4 millimeters long with thin, long legs. The antennae on these ants are also slender and long, sometimes being longer than the body itself. Actually, these ants have two other names, long-legged ant and Maldive ant. The long-legged part is totally self-explanatory, but why Maldive? Apparently, they are native to the Maldives, which are a small island nation in the Indian Ocean. It's actually an island hopper's dream because it contains around 1,000 small islands and 26 atolls or so. It's also an incredibly beautiful place. And maybe, just maybe, all the flight traffic to and from this idyllic island nation have enabled these small ants to spread far and wide, hitchhiking their way around the globe via trade routes. They're now found in tropical and subtropical regions, including parts of Africa, Australia, and the Pacific Islands. These ants really aren't picky about where they live. They set up colonies in rainforests, farmlands, urban areas, you name it. But they especially thrive in warm, humid environments where they can find ample food and shelter. This adaptability has made them a significant problem in biodiversity hotspots. But why? In ecosystems like Australia's Christmas Island, these ants have devastated populations of native red land crabs. These crabs are critical for maintaining the island's forest ecosystem because they control leaf litter and seedling growth. Without the crabs, the forest floor becomes overrun with weeds, altering the entire habitat. This ripple effect doesn't stop there. Yellow crazy ants outcompete native ant species, disrupt pollination, and reduce biodiversity. In agricultural settings, they've been known to protect crop-damaging pests like aphids and scale insects in exchange for honeydew, a sugary secretion. It's like an unholy alliance between two garden villains. In fact, it's believed that these ants sometimes rely so heavily on honeydew-producing scale insects that if you reduce or eliminate their scale insect partners, the ant colony will be dramatically reduced. Yellow crazy ants are eusocial insects, meaning their colonies operate like a single, well-coordinated organism. A single colony can house multiple queens, workers, and broods, allowing them to expand rapidly. And there are usually large divisions of labor between the non-reproductive ants and the ants which can. What's especially alarming is the aggressive nature of yellow crazy ants. They hunt collectively, swarming prey and using formic acid sprays to subdue their victims. This chemical weapon is not only deadly to other insects, but also to small vertebrates and even plants when sprayed in large amounts. When food is plentiful, these ants become unstoppable, outcompeting native species and disrupting local food webs. They'll eat just about anything: seeds, fruit, insects, and small vertebrates. It's like having an all-you-can-eat buffet mentality on a planetary scale. Reports from Australia tell us that when their colonies reach very high densities, they leave entire forests silent. It's like those horror stories of people walking through woods to suddenly find that there's an absence of all sound. It never ends well, by the way. At this point, you must be thinking that these ants are indeed crazy. But the funny part is their name doesn't come from any of the things we've talked about so far. It's actually because of how these ants walk. Yellow crazy ants got the name crazy because of their chaotic, zigzagging movements when they're disturbed. I mean, they seriously do look crazy. It's a nightmare to people who are scared of small, fast-moving things. But aside from how they move and why they're called crazy, let's talk about how these ants actually grow their colonies to crazy proportions. The life cycle of a yellow crazy ant is impressively efficient. As I mentioned earlier, these ants are eusocial, which means they can have multiple queens in a single colony. Queens lay eggs that develop into larvae through the year, but sexual offspring are generally produced a month or two before the rainy season. The worker ants, those are the sterile females, handle all the foraging, nest maintenance, and brood care. Meanwhile, the queens focus exclusively on laying more eggs. Worker ants can live up to 84 days, while queens can live as long as 3 years or so. Colonies can grow rapidly, forming interconnected nests called supercolonies that cover enormous areas. These supercolonies are almost impossible to eliminate too because they're so resilient. Destroy one part, and another simply takes over. A supercolony of yellow crazy ants can have up to 1,000 ants per square meter. Single colonies can consist of over 500,000 ants with thousands of queens, and supercolonies can span hundreds of hectares with 20 million per hectare. It's no wonder they can make a forest go silent. That being said, there are ways to get rid of them. And I'm going to start with a great story of the first ever large-scale invasive ant eradication, which happened on Johnston Atoll, a 640-acre migratory bird refuge in the North Pacific. Yellow crazy ants arrived here before 2010 and quickly started taking over, wreaking havoc on the local populations of red-tailed tropic birds. As a result, a dedicated group called the Crazy Ant Strike Team started researching and testing the best methods for removing them. The removal efforts involve several innovative techniques, like insecticidal baits such as hydrogel crystals infused with insecticides. Over time, these methods were refined through trial and error to ensure effectiveness. In addition to chemical treatments, the teams also conducted thorough manual searches across the island to find and eliminate remaining nests. They even had trained dogs which were deployed to detect any surviving ants. These dogs helped confirm the success of the eradication efforts, with no ants detected during their extensive surveys by late 2017. Continuous monitoring and habitat restoration followed to prevent reinfestation. The eradication of yellow crazy ants on Johnston Atoll marked a major conservation achievement, as it was the first successful removal of this invasive species from such a large area in the United States. The effort has provided a model for addressing invasive species in other sensitive environments around the world. Today, Johnston Atoll's seabird colonies are thriving once again, free from the destructive impact of yellow crazy ants. Of course, there are other methods too, such as tackling their coveted honeydew farms, specifically using biocontrol in the form of parasitoid wasps to target scale insects. Although it should be mentioned that this method is good for quarantine populations of yellow crazy ants that rely heavily on honeydew as a food source, like the yellow crazy ants on Christmas Island in Australia. It probably and unfortunately won't be as effective for mainland populations, which are able to use much more natural resources. At any rate, that's gonna cover this episode on the crazy yellow ants. Please go rate and review this show on Spotify and Apple or wherever you listen. You can also further show your support by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/insectsforfun. Over there are a bunch of bonus episodes, vlogs, and you can of course also receive ad-free episodes all directly placed into the podcast streaming platform of your choice. Just copy the RSS feed given to you on patreon.com. And thank you again for listening.